Good evening. I'm Mayor Tom Pahal. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting, which is a working agenda session on pedestrian safety for our town. I should add that, and I'll introduce the dais in a few minutes, but tonight is about not fixing the blame, but creating solutions to our issues, our pedestrian issues. We have done a number of things in the past. We have been working hard, but we still have quite a ways to go. Let me introduce our panel. To my left is Chief Rob Rettenberg, the co-chairs of the Metuchen Traffic and Transportation Committee, Jay Galeota and Tyrene Reuter, who have just taken on that role recently and have done a great job. To my right is former Mayor Bill Neary, who is the president of Keep Middlesex Moving, and my council president, Jay Muldoon. Now, and our planner is not up here. He's going to be doing a presentation too, Jim Constantine. All right. Now, as I said, there are a number of issues that we have been trying to address, and I think when you see some of Jim's reports and some of the reports from our various people up here, you'll see what I'm talking about. Back in, I believe, October, November, I met with the two co-chair of the Traffic and Transportation, and I said that I wanted them to develop a program which had a three-pronged approach. One was education, the other was events or activities, and the last one was a way to encourage enforcement with our police department to make Metuchen a safer place for us to walk and be able to live. And I know that, you know, with this day and age, with cars and with people cutting through our town as a throughway town, it makes it difficult. So I'm going to turn the program over to the police chief. Chief, Rob, if you have something to say.
Sure. I'm going to spend probably 20 minutes or so discussing some of the issues that we see at the police department. I'm going to talk some statistics, which are somewhat alarming nationwide and throughout the state of New Jersey in reference to pedestrian safety. You know, as you all probably see or read in the newspaper or on TV, throughout the United States, pedestrian safety has become a growing problem. New Jersey, being such a densely populated state, has a tremendous of vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, and Metuchen, being a small bedroom community within a very large county, has a tremendous volume of pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic. Granted, we have Route 27, which is a one-way each way highway, but there's thousands of cars that come through here. We're surrounded by numerous toll roads and interstates. So as anyone that lives here on a Saturday or a Sunday or a rush hour, you see the traffic. It's quite enormous. But we also have the issue where we have a small community that has a lot of shopping area. We have the train station. We have a lot of commuters. And we also run a lot of events in the borough of Metuchen. So putting this all together, you know, it creates a problem. And as a result, it's not uncommon, you know, for us to see pedestrian accidents. Nationally, motor vehicle accident fatalities have been on a steady decline since 2005. I think part of that is from the car manufacturers. Cars are safer. Cars now will, you know, if you get too close to a car, an alarm will go off. They're just built better. But when it comes to pedestrian fatalities nationwide, they were seeing a steady decrease until about 2010, and suddenly we saw a small spike, but an increase of about 4.2% in fatalities. They did see what's more dramatic is in that year a 19% increase in pedestrian accidents nationally. So 19% increase in accidents and 4.2% in fatalities nationwide. So that's quite alarming. New Jersey once again, another, heavily populated state, unfortunately has seen a rise in pedestrian accidents and motor vehicle accidents. And I'm going by statistics from 2011. Middlesex County, unfortunately, has the distinction for 2011 of having the highest motor vehicle death rate in the state of New Jersey. And that was, there were 54 deaths in 2011, up from 37 in 2010. Middlesex County also ranked third in the state for pedestrian deaths at 13, only to be beaten out by Essex County with 18 and Ocean County with 16. Pedestrian safety in Metuchen has always been something that we've been concerned with. And fortunately, pedestrian accidents is actually a very small percentage of our accidents. We average between 700 and 750 motor vehicle accident investigations per year in the borough of Metuchen. Approximately 2% of those are pedestrian accidents. But unfortunately, pedestrian accidents is the #1 cause of traumatic deaths within the borough of Metuchen. In the last 10 years, we've averaged 12 pedestrian accidents a year. During that period, 4 of them were fatalities. We had 2 in 2002, 1 in 2007, and 1 in 2011. Last year, 2012, we had 11 pedestrian accidents. And the one interesting part of it is the majority of them are happening in crosswalks. So they're at intersections with lights. 9 occurred in a crosswalk. 6 of the 11 that we had were a result of a vehicle making a left turn. And that's one thing I've noticed in some of our most serious accidents, especially our last 2 fatal accidents, occurred where you had a vehicle wanting to make a turn on a side street, and pedestrian is walking across, and the car makes a left and strikes the pedestrian. Approximately 55% of last year's accidents were left turn accidents. So that's definitely an issue. The locations of the accidents, there's really no one particular area. It's really, we had one location where we had 2 pedestrians struck twice. Main and New, we had 2 accidents, pedestrian accidents at that location. The other areas were Main and Lincoln, Central and Durham, which actually was a crossing guard who was walking to his post. Fortunately, he wasn't injured, but he was struck. Lake and High, Middlesex, over by Main Street, by somebody cutting through, not by the crosswalk. Grove and Oakland, Main and Middlesex, Durham and John, and the last one we had, Middlesex and Oak, that was the last and most serious accident of the year, happened in December. People often ask, okay, why, what can we do? Why do these things happen? Statistically, there's not a lot of information. Even the federal government hasn't done a whole lot of research into it. I'm sure they're doing it now, but a lot is pointing out to driver inattention, driver distractions, cell phones. We're in the electronic age. Everybody's got the iPhones. You can do everything on your iPhone. You got the internet. You got games. You got you name it. You can do it. That appears to be one of the causes of these increases in pedestrian accidents. We're finding a correlation with people being impaired, drivers and pedestrians being impaired. Speeding, poorly designed roads or lack of signage can be a contributor. We find weather and lighting conditions also can be a contributing factor. I did find one study back in 2009. An organization called Safe Kids USA did a study, and it involved 15 states, including New Jersey. I believe they used the Morristown area. And the study was done on weekdays only and during school hours. And they observed a total of 41,426 cars during the study. And what they found is they broke it down. They identified whether it was female driver, male driver, what they were doing, what they could observe, and what they were distracted while they were driving. Interesting, they found that, nothing against the ladies, 187 out of 1,000 female drivers were distracted versus 154 of 1,000 male drivers were distracted. They found that cell phone and electronics was the leading distractor, followed by eating, drinking, and smoking, reaching, looking behind, grooming, and reading. Female drivers were more distracted by cell phones and grooming than men, and the majority of distracted drivers were observed actually during the afternoon time. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates about 7.3% of drivers are distracted due to cell phones. So that's just cell phones. That's not including any other distractions that may be out there. You know, we have been discussing a lot of what, you know, we're talking about the drivers and the responsibilities of being alert and attentive. But it's also, you have to remember, it's the responsibility of the pedestrian. It's, you know, we've investigated motor vehicle accidents, pedestrian accidents where it's not necessarily the driver's fault. You know, somebody darts out into the roadway, that kind of thing. You know, always remember that as a pedestrian, you have the most to lose. So you have to be a little bit more careful and cognizant. Just like the drivers, the pedestrians are out there, and I observe it all the time. You know, they're crossing the road, they got their iPhone, and they're doing this, or they got their earphones in, and they can't hear, and they're not watching. They're not doing, you know, the basics of crossing a street, you know, looking left, look right, look left, you know, make sure the car stops, you know. And because everybody's in their own electronic world, and I think that's, you know, on both sides, the drivers and the pedestrians, has become a very big problem. You know, I'll hear people say, well, I'm the pedestrian, I have the right of way. Well, most times you do, but you still have to be careful because, you know, you're going to get hit by a 4,000-pound car. You're going to be the one that's going to be laid up for a long time. So, you know, just, you know, try to use common sense. Do not assume the driver sees you or is paying attention. Always, you know, think that, you know, this person, until they stop, don't venture out into the roadway. I'm horrified sometimes, you know, on Main Street by Penn Avenue, and, you know, they redesigned that whole crosswalk with new lighting, and there's an audible bell that goes off, and it's a great setup. But how many times I watch people, you know, today I watch somebody just, you know, walk across. They don't activate the lights. Or they activate the lights and they just walk across thinking, okay, they have to stop. Well, you have to look. People, you know, like I said, with the cell phones and everything, people aren't paying attention. So, you know, don't be complacent, you know, because, you know, it's your life. And, you know, it's a there's two parts to this. You know, we're trying to educate the drivers, but I'm also trying to educate the pedestrians. And, you know, it's just important that, you know, I know it's angers me when I go to try to, you know, cross the road, and there's 3 or 4 cars that go by. You know, good example, we had the new Greenway, and we have this crossing over down by the old Cryans, and they have all these yellow lights set up. And, you know, I had some concerns about that, and I called the county and asked them to come in and take a look at it, because down by Route 27 by Metro Park, they install the red signals, which I really like. So, gentleman from the county, a couple of gentlemen came out from the county, and I said, you know, I just have my concerns. We did a traffic study. We found that during peak times we had 500 plus cars in an hour traveling that area. So we're standing there talking, and somebody comes up, a young lady comes up, she hits the button, the lights go off, and we're watching. There goes one car, another car. Probably a dozen cars were by. Nobody slowed down. And I said, this is the point I'm trying to make, is that yellow doesn't mean anything. And you know what, now I'm going to get into the law. The law now says you must stop. And you know, my feeling is yellow, people don't react to yellow. Yellow is, you know, people are oblivious to yellow, but red, people react to red. So they said they are looking into possibly changing that system. So I haven't heard back from them, but I will be, I'll definitely be in touch with them. Speaking of the law, April 1st, 2010, New Jersey changed the law for pedestrian safety. It used to be that you had to yield to a pedestrian in a crosswalk. They changed it to, must stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk, crossing a roadway with any marked crosswalk or any unmarked crosswalk at an intersection. This law does not pertain to movement of traffic that's regulated by a police officer or has a traffic signal present. So in other words, if you're at Main and 27, we have the countdown and has the, you have to follow that. I see so many times people follow the light. We have the left turn lanes, and I'll see person in the left turn lane, they got the green arrow, and I'm watching the pedestrian, and they disregard, and now they're walking across, and now this person's making a left, and So getting back to, it's a responsibility of the pedestrian and the driver to be working together. With the countdown signs, don't walk signs, make sure you follow them. If it says you got 3 seconds to go across the road, don't go across the road. Once again, use common sense. I've been touching upon a lot of different things. I could probably spend hours on this topic. But how is this pedestrian safety issue being addressed? Basically what you see here. We have, the Traffic Transportation Committee, you have the police department, you have the mayor and council present. We realize that there's a problem. One person getting hurt or killed is one too many. And so we're trying to look at ways to better the safety of the residents of Metuchen. One thing the police department has done is we have received grants. We actually got one last year from the county, which we used for overtime. So we would actually have officers go out. One is a decoy. We've done Main and Penn. We've done on 27 where officer, plain clothes would walk across the street. The car wouldn't stop. There would be a police car down the road, and they would pull over and issue a ticket. We also take a zero tolerance attitude for anybody that is stopped for disregard for pedestrian. There's no brakes on it. The other thing is I've been in touch with state officials and state road officials and county officials, like I mentioned about the Greenway. Also spoke to state officials in reference to Route 27 in Oak, where we had this most recent pedestrian accident. The state is coming in. They're going to re-sign that area up by Middlesex and Oak. They are also going to change the crosswalk, the design, make it more reflective and more visible. The other thing, we also have been involved with education. We have done talks in the schools. I'm looking forward to doing some talks with our seniors and other adult organizations. One statistic is you do find a large amount of children and older people that are victims of pedestrian accidents. So briefly, I'm gonna go over some safety tips. They sound like common sense. They are common sense, but a lot of times I think what happens is we get caught up and we're not paying attention, and all you need is that one mistake, and you can, be in the hospital. Always cross at corners. Try not to walk out from in between cars. I know on Main Street it's easy to do it. You don't want to go all the way to the corner, but you know what? You're really exposing yourself. And also, as a pedestrian, if you walk out, that's jaywalking. You could get a ticket. You also, the other thing you got to remember, taking a step back, is even if you're in a crosswalk. Good example, you're at Main and Penn, that new crosswalk that we have with the lights and everything. You push that button and you just step out into the street where a car does not have enough time to stop, where it's not unrealistic. You're at fault. You have to be realistic. You have to, you push that button, you still have to cross like you normally. You're going to look left, you're going to look right, you're going to look left, you're going to make eye contact with the driver. You're going to wait, and you want to make sure that the car is slowing down and comes to a stop before you proceed. So you just can't just push the button and walk out, and I've seen people do that, and it horrifies me. Mentioned look left, right, left again. Watch for turning cars. That's the one problem we have with the left, cars making a left turn. You know, think about it when and I guarantee anybody that's a driver has had that happen, where you're waiting for the lane to clear, cars are coming, and you go to make your turn, and oh boy, there's somebody in a crosswalk. I know I've had it happen to me, you know, and what happens is you get so fixated on trying to wait for that clearing to come, you miss it. So it can happen. So you got to be really, really cognizant and careful observing when you're making a left turn. And as a pedestrian crossing, you know, look over your right shoulder. Always check. Always walk on a sidewalk. Always, if you can't walk on a sidewalk, walk against traffic. Obey all traffic signals. Once again, to walk, don't walk. If it has a signal that you can activate it, you know, to activate the signal. Remain alert. Don't assume that cars are stopping. You know, you don't know what's in that person's mind, what they're thinking. They had a bad day. They're angry. They've been drinking. Their vision is not good. It's dark out. It's raining. You know, we took some photos of Main Street by Main and Penn at night, and just watching people crossing the road there, commuters at night. And it's amazing how you can't see people, even with all those lights, and you know, you have the distractions of the storefronts. You have the distraction of the yellow lights on the bridge warning trucks, you know, of the low bridge. So not only the distractions of that, you also have the outside distractions that break you away, you know, and draw your attention away from the road. So, you know, you have to be careful with that. Don't talk on a cell phone. Wear earphones when crossing the street. You know, you got those earphones on. I mean, when you're crossing, you can hear trucks, you can hear cars, you can hear the motors, the engines, you know. It's important. At nighttime, you know, that's one thing there aren't too many manufacturers that produce dark or bright clothing, you know. You look at anybody, commuters, they all have dark clothing. That's the fad. It's brown, it's black, it's blue. But at nighttime, you know, it's dangerous, you know, and as a driver, you can't see. So, you know, if you're a commuter, or you can be walking downtown, you know, they make these little wristlets that have reflectors on them. Anything to make yourself visible, you know, a little flashlight, something. You know, make yourself visible to the cars, because, you know, we've all been there driving and you go, whoa, where'd that person come from, you know? Any type of reflection device. And if you're a walker, like you like walking for exercise, buy a traffic vest. You can buy them, you know, they're you know, the bright green with the reflective, wear them, you know. They work. And the other thing, stay sober. You know, if you're drinking and walking, and drinking and driving they don't go hand in hand. They're both bad. You know, you get people who just, you know, stagger out into the roadway to get hit by cars, and obviously drunk driver. We know, you know, how bad that can be. Also, if you have children, you know, discuss this with your children. Talk to them about pedestrian safety. Show them, you know, these activated lights. Show them, you know, how to cross at an intersection. You know, it's important. And I just want to speak briefly about the flags that we put out, the pilot program we're doing with these pedestrian flags. One thing to do is when you use these flags, you know, they're really used to draw the attention of, you know, you to the driver. Don't automatically assume because you got the flag, you're just going to start waving the flag and you can just walk out into the street. You know, you want to stay on the side of the road, get their attention, and once again, you're going to look left. If cars coming, you're going to make eye contact. They make eye contact with you, you see them slow down, they stop, okay, now you can proceed, you know, wave the flag until the car is in the opposite direction, catch your attention, they stop, and then you can cross. So I just don't, you know, I think sometimes with not just the flags, but any of these you know, lights or any other devices that we have to assist pedestrians. I think many of us sometimes think, well, because we have them, people are going to stop and they have to stop. They don't. Many times they won't. So just, you know, use them as a tool. That's how I look at it. So, and I think other than that, I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to turn it over to our planner now, Jim Constantine. I know he has some slides to show and some history and showing some of the things that we're looking at trying to accomplish. Jim, the floor is yours. Oh, before you start, I wanted to recognize our liaison to traffic and transportation, Jim Wallace, came in. I know that he had another activity before this. Yep.
Yeah, that's something, isn't it? That's a great thing. Yeah, I love it.
There's Jim on the side, Jim Wallace on the side.
It's harder for me to see from up here. Thank you. I wanted to first, share. I'm on, okay. I wanted to share first a little bit of history and then do a quick synopsis of the borough circulation plan, the Reconnecting Your Community plan that we did in 2009. I think we go all the way back, and Chief, look at that. We actually used to have a streetcar that ran down the middle of Main Street. There's the Pennsylvania Avenue Railroad, or Pennsylvania Avenue intersection right there on Main Street. But you know, we can't turn the clock back. And I know many people have heard this, and this is certainly not an excuse, but I pulled up this map, 1947. There's Metuchen. If you look at the density of the street pattern, you can see that Metuchen was the most built up. It was the center of formerly Raritan Township then, at that time, now Edison. And you can see that obviously all of these clean yellow areas are now heavily developed and built up. And so the situation where at that time Metuchen had a population that rose to about 16,000, I believe, in the 1970s, sort of peaked, and Edison then was about 40,000 at that time, has obviously shifted with Edison going well over 100,000, Metuchen dropping and then sort of coming back up to some degree. And so when you hear the issue of background traffic and growth and the hole in the donut, and there's only a couple of routes through, that to me graphically just made it incredibly clear. So it's impossible to turn the clock back, you know, and this is kind of a peak period downtown Main Street, but it's sort of sleepy. You can almost imagine dogs could sort of sleep in the gutter because there just wasn't the intensity of through traffic that you face today, which is incredibly hard. I'm going to go through a series of efforts, but I sort of feel sometimes like we're the little Dutch boy in the dike in the water, and we keep doing efforts, and there is no science, but really evolving art in how to treat traffic. So through the 80s, I think Metuchen's to be commended. At least it recognized the value of Main Street, invested in things like pedestrian scale street lamps, and you know that's important. When you get to the issue of pedestrian scale, there's a whole series of visual cues that do help motorists to some degree realize that they're in an environment that's different, allowing things, and believe me, it was a bit of a fight, and some folks needed to be convinced that there would be people that would actually want to dine on Main Street. I was told, I remember back by one borough official way back when, nobody would ever eat on Main Street. Well, I'm glad the community has voted differently with their experience. And if you look at least on a good day, what we've tried to maintain and then reinforce on Main Street is really the definition of what planners like to call an outdoor room. You have sort of wonderful walls with lots of windows, sort of the right scale distance, the protection of parallel parking to the pedestrians so that this whole pedestrian realm can be enjoyed. And and become kind of the community main street. That all said, I know that the sheer volume of traffic is a problem. We'll talk a little bit about the solutions. The other thing that we've tried to do is recognize that the DNA for what we need to create what you call a pedestrian-friendly street or a livable street is contained right here on Main Street. And so we've tried to use those as the design guidelines to do new buildings, infill. This is on Route 27. And for people that thought somebody would never sit at a sidewalk cafe on Main Street, then this guy on 27 must be really crazy. But it's not. It's a human desire to want to take back community, take back streets. You need to set the framework and the guidance. Plug in or find another source. Hold on one second. Boy, I thought we had this on. And oh,
Computer's not plugged in here. You gotta plug it back in.
Bob, thank you. All right, appreciate that. Okay. And so one of the things that we've done over the years is tried, and the reason I'm just showing this little bit of history is because I think sometimes you fight these little battles, you try to do the right thing. It's hard because you don't often stop and see it incrementally, and if you're new to town, you don't realize some of the things that have gone on, and I'll call it recent history, really since the 1980s. But we've attempted to bring some of the buildings back out to the street along 27, frame it. By the way, for those that don't know, there is an approved building for the front of Seymour's, and so actually that infill building came second. We're not responsible for landlords that don't occupy their buildings, but going all the way back to the mid-'80s, you know, filling in this site by bringing a building up to the street, you know, design-wise, we might do it a little differently today, but I think we understood that buildings to the street, reinforcing the streetscape, creating windows and eyes on the street, and creating that wall for pedestrians was very important, and motorists react differently. Okay, let's go to 1998. This is what Main Street looked like at Pennsylvania Avenue, and this was the condition we had. And by the way, one of the things we noted in one of the workshops, you know, it was a citizen comment, said, why does everything need to be painted safety yellow? And you'll see that detail come up, and it was such an acute observation. So obviously we had the whole problems that you experience today, even worse at that time here. And so the vision, if you watch this image, was to bump out the corner, bring the crosswalks across. At that time it was, can we paint the road narrower? Because we knew there was a constriction issue that was affecting that. Paint the yellow black to match the street lamps. And then there's a bus stop issue that's down in here. We'll talk about the remainder on that in a minute. But what I wanted to point to from this, just in terms of something that I think sometimes we never go back and look and say, you know, did we come up with a plan and did we do it? This is what was built. If you go back for a second, I mean, even down to the little ideas of signs and awnings to improve the building, you might argue that we did a pretty good job. Now, we recognize later that there was originally, this was painted yellow, then it became a stripe. There was still a need to go back and further eliminate a parking space that was a problem, and a lot of that was challenged. This was what was there historically, and I always put that in there too because I think it's easy to romanticize the past. There were wonderful street lamps and signs, but Main Street was also a little bit gritty. There's not a blade of grass or a tree. It was perhaps in some ways not as green and clean as it is today. So there were a number of elements to the stationary improvement plan. Some were implemented, some weren't. The yellow was definitely something that we kind of chased back and repainted and got away with. And I looked at these and it was jarring to me how strong that was, and you know, lived with for so many years around the station area. Areas like this were improved with the pedestrian walkway to the parking lot, and then we had this bus stop down in here that was a real problem because of all the congestion at the station. When buses came in, it was a wind tunnel, litter gathered at the bottom of the street down in here, created a very problematic situation, and so part of the solution was to move the bus stop from there up to here. Oh, it's not here yet because actually this was where the bus stop was at that time, and today that's what's there. So you look at it and you say, okay, there have been some pretty good success stories out there. You know, probably we never celebrate them enough as a community. And I will tell you, I take great pride because if you actually go out and look at the number of people that are using the buses, you have an incredibly high usage of these bus shelters. There are a lot of students that are going to Middlesex Community College. There are people that are transferring from the train. And from a pedestrian standpoint, all of those people that are using transit are coming into your community and they're not using their car, so they're sort of the best possible way to move people through from a sustainability standpoint. There's some of the students going to Middlesex County College. All right, 96, it was actually a little bit earlier than that. This is Middlesex Lake, so here is the former supermarket. This is the gas station at the corner, the Duchess Diner. This was a New Jersey DOT proposal. So, you know, it used to be that you could go out and for, cheap howls, you know, say that, you know, the DOT is public enemy number one in this community. And I tell you, you can say that in a lot of places, and people will agree. I think the good news in this ending is that DOT's, at that time, very highway-oriented solution, which was going to connect Lake and Central, which some people supported in the community, was very much highway engineering solution, was stopped, and it was stopped by a coalition of elected officials and others. Jim Conlon, former councilman, former chief engineer for the Garden State Parkway, analyzed the numbers. This was funded and built around 2000. It would have improved the traffic situation for a couple of years, and it would have went from F to C. And about 6 to 8 years later, it would be back at F. So it wasn't really offering a solution. And the big issue that Jim pointed out was because the Lake Avenue underpass is 2 lanes, the St. Joe's Central Avenue underpass is 2 lanes, you weren't dealing with some of the real issues. You could move traffic temporarily faster in town. So instead, that sort of got us focused on what to do with this site and Franklin Square. And I would also point out, this is Brent Barnes, who used to be with the DOT. The DOT, I say this now, is really, I think, Metuchen's ally, because they have a whole series of policies on complete streets through context-sensitive design, a toolbox they didn't have back in the 90s, they have today, 20 years later, to do more creative things. And one of the things that Brent did when we were looking at the redevelopment with the district and this whole area in here was study whether a rotary or a roundabout, whichever you might want to call it, could potentially work here. They couldn't make the geometries work, although we thought it was a brilliant idea for a short period of time. So, but the thing that we were also focused on, recognizing, some people would say, that's across the street, you need to put up a wall, you need to berm, you need to turn your back. You know, nobody would want to live across the street, but we took a long-term vision and said, if we're going to take back Middlesex Avenue and make it a town center street once again, the suicide lane now is almost 40 years old, and we'll get to how to eliminate that at the end of this. The way we have to do it is by making a pedestrian environment first, and lots of people said we were a little bit crazy to do this. You know, there's no way this is going to work, on-street parking on Middlesex and things of that nature, but we use the queues to make a great pedestrian space and place, activate it and protect pedestrians with on-street parking that's used by the residents that live there, bring public space right out to Route 27, celebrate the former schoolhouse, and recognize that you can make a livable street by using proven, time-tested, proven techniques. We then carried the same thing across Central Avenue to the old Economy Forms plant. So this was a brownfields redevelopment. And if you look up on Central Avenue, you start to think about now, we're getting at big distances of a quarter mile here, 2 blocks there. It starts to add up in terms of the amount of street that we've tried to take back. Again, using the same cues, the on-street parking to protect pedestrians. By the way, I think we'll now have a chance to go back to Central Avenue with some changes at the county level to look at it again. And then we had the car lot that was just there recently again. You know, we pulled buildings up to the street and created a pedestrian-friendly streetscape, even though we had at that time a car lot. And I wanted to, because I think this is a pretty recent victory to celebrate. This was only 5-6 years ago. Everybody can remember this. And today we have a little square and a fire pit and outdoor dining and seating out front. And so all these things, you know, they don't add up all at once, and they're not all contiguous and next to each other. So they're the little victories that are kind of on scattered sites that you're trying to do. Windows to the street, making a building that engages the street, not a parking lot in front. Improvements up Central Avenue. We did a Central Avenue and South Main Street plan back in the 90s as well. And today, I don't have the after picture. Those of you know, it's little details. This sign is now smaller and darker background, and there's landscaping in here, and there's street lamps in front. So we tried to pull back the streetscape. Bernadette Swalajay's here. She owns this. This was approved by the planning board 2 weeks ago, and we'll fill in with shade trees and street lamps and a building improvement. So it's one by one, it's little by little, you're trying to take back the street. This is one that didn't get implemented, that was in that plan. If you watch the intersection of Durham and Central, which did have bump outs and corners, and there's sometimes ideas that you might want to come back and look at again at a later date and re-examine. And then last, South Main Street. Some of you, let's see where we are here, South Main at High. We did a plan there, and so the intersection of High and Lincoln, the traffic calming that was there wasn't just thought about as a speed table. It also, in the long-term vision, said you really want to try to take back the edges of the street and reinforce that with things that are comforting and encourage pedestrians. And there we are working with the police department, cone testing some of the bump outs to see that they worked, and it's always important to do that sort of thing. This curb line on the former Bruno site is now out here. And the story on the traffic calming on South Main, it was originally designed to be much more geometrically aggressive for the pass-through traffic. At that time, the county had just approved and Edison had implemented the Clara Barton downtown improvements. And I remember going to a county meeting and having a freeholder tell me, you have traffic calming, we're not doing it, we don't like it, it didn't work in Clara Barton, no traffic calming. So we got a compromised version of what we could get at that time. I think now there's a lot of advancement, again, even in the county engineer's office. And then out in the Southwest Gateway area, here is 287. Sorry, I have to, do I have that right? Yeah, there's the railroad, there's Bridgepoint, there's Walmart. That's my way, that's my identity for everybody. Even the improvements in this area here, which you say, well, does anybody really walk out there? Well, we said, you know, first and foremost, there's lots of places along Route 27, up and down the line that I've seen. They've just ignored sidewalks. We make sure we get the sidewalks in there. So when you talk about complete streets, we've really been living that philosophy for quite some time with respect to making sure that we get sidewalks, even in places where a lot of people would say, hey, you know, I don't really think you're going to get a lot of people walking there. We make sure the pedestrian infrastructure is in place, even with things in front of automobile repair shops. So, you know, you go to, you know, what we've been doing in the way of complete streets. This is the Metuchen mower. The sidewalks are there. The shade trees are there. The pedestrian scale street lamps are there. We've tried to use the same design vocabulary and all. And then one last thing. The community worked long and hard to get the Greenway and see the first leg implemented, and it's really a regional improvement. And again, I think it's just something to celebrate that, you know, if anything, you could be critical and say it took too long to get to that point, and that's why I think we focused on the Greenway extension plan, which I'll talk about in a second. But the next point about it is starting to look at where you can bike to. I know I tried to bike to Tano Mall to test that little model out. It does work. Hopefully others will. And also, how can we get more connections to it? Because I think we're starting to already see demand exceeding the number of portals to get into it. So with that, let me switch and show you the circulation plan. Maybe 30 minutes, and I'm going to stay exactly to that. Not really. All right. So we, and there were a number of people, I know some of the folks that are here in the audience participated in this process, and we assembled baseline data, we did walkability surveys, we established some goals and objectives with the planning board, had a couple of community workshops, there was data collection and analysis, and then a plan that came out of all of this. And Metuchen never had a circulation plan before that. Go back to that slide I showed from the 1950s on Main Street. There really historically was not the kind of traffic problems that we face today. So the community told us what are the most problematic vehicular hotspots. And my guess is a lot of these would stay at the top of the list today because they're just sort of a constant. The community told us where are some of the most dangerous places for pedestrians. We had our observations, but we made sure we vetted this in terms of how people actually use Metuchen and the community to try to determine what was there. And this became a public input focus for where we were going to focus some elements of the plan. And this was, I know, a challenging one at that time, back in 2008, 2009, because a lot of people just said, I can't even imagine biking, and I've shared this, my theory on this all was there was no safe harbor to reach. Now that the Greenway is open, I think the community would answer this differently. They would, it would be about how do I get myself and my family safely to the Greenway, because that is a place I can reach and bike safely. So that's a challenge. We focused on a number of things that really spanned a whole range from regional traffic improvements, completing the 287 interchange, we'll go into that, the Middlesex Greenway extension, some of these missing mid-block connections, design and jurisdiction of Route 27, intersection improvements, some train station improvements, and then some parking and traffic calming, and then down to kind of pedestrian. By the way, it's not meant to say pedestrian is last, but that's the range of things we focused on. And we did start because it has the biggest regional impact in looking at the 27-287 interchange, which most of you know was never completed, and the missing links have a huge impact on traffic in town. And so we attempted to incorporate in, and in fact the Honda dealership respected allowing for Bridge Street to continue. So we at least know there's a plan out there. The downside is it's not on the transportation improvement plan for the Metropolitan Planning Organization at this point or with DOT, but there is a plan, lands reserved. We don't have any buildings located where we would want to do this. So that's or any new buildings where we would want to do it. Then the Greenway was the next sort of big thing. It was planned to be open till there. It is now opened. But the real issue is how do we get the extension and how do we allow people to reach not just the safe harbor of the Greenway, but the 1,200 acres of the Dismal Swamp, which is the great regional outdoor space, the great green backyard. And then we had places, this is Middlesex Central, this is where the Sportsplex is, former Cryans, the former Suburban Dodge dealership, huge blocks of land without any local streets through them. In fact, there used to be some local streets, at least on paper, in these areas. And so we focused on how we could, it goes forward there, provide some interconnectivity, not bypass routes. This is not meant to create bypass, but the ability for better movement within the community. That included the potential Liberty Street circulation route. Some people call it the Liberty Street truck route. And if you're living on Central Avenue and you deal with all those trucks, you feel that that's an important element in the plan. It included things like this street here, which we actually have approved with the former Suburban Dodge site. The street piece that's built in front of the Sportsplex is part of this plan. And then there was the idea of coming under the railroad. We'll leave that on hold for now. That was always a controversial piece and a more challenging one. We also got DOT to contribute a 9-intersection study because of a lot of the other circulation efforts that we were doing in town and some of the funding that we were focused on. And they looked at these intersections, that's Grove and Middlesex, Main and Middlesex, Main and Amboy there, Lake and Amboy, and then the Lake Middlesex Central mess there, and that's Durham and Central. And one of the things that came out of that through a combination of both timing improvements with smart lights, because our lights are basically on a cycle. They're not current technology. There's nothing that deals with the actual traffic conditions down at the intersection. So those are the timing improvements. And then they had some suggestion lane improvements in some instances. Some of them were a little more radical than others. But if you actually follow across, here's the existing conditions, AM peak 2008. So you can see here this, for instance, Central and Middlesex is what they call a level of service, LOSC. The average delay is 21.6 seconds. With the timing improvements, there was minimal change. But if you look at others, you can see that the timing goes down. The timing here goes in half, and it goes from a level of service E to C. That's 27 in Middlesex, and so on down the line, that there's generally a trend towards improvement. And they modeled all of this in a 3D software package called Viz so that we could see it. These are some of the 2008 PM peak hours, again, the existing conditions in this column, and then what happens with timing improvements, and then what happens in lane improvements. You know, the bad news is that there's very few things that can get back to a level of service of B or A. A lot of things go from F to D, F to C, you know, and they get a bit better and probably a little more livable for the community at large. Okay, that brought us to Route 27 in the downtown, which unfortunately, you know, really it's the legacy of the suicide lane. And I think because this wasn't your main street, for instance, like Highland Park, where the on-street parking remained and the suicide lane didn't go in, it really became a legacy of challenge. And so the idea here was to basically take the thing that most separates the two halves of the community, right in the center of town, Route 27, and seam it back together with pedestrian shelter refuge islands that would be built in the center with some combination of landscaping. They might look something like this. This is a community I worked in the Pacific Northwest. They allow a left turn here, but eliminated it in that direction there. There's a whole lot of detailed design that would need to come about, but effectively we would focus on Main Street to the railroad underpass on Lake Avenue, those 5 blocks. In the future, for instance, if the firehouse were moved to another location, that might extend out further in that direction past Main Street. And as we kind of zoom in, the idea was to do a series of improvements that, and this is just very conceptual, that might use a blend of both the islands, textured crosswalks. You could use the Main Street streetlights, landscaping, bollards, and possibly bike lanes. That's sort of I think, to be studied further. Maybe adding some parallel parking back on. So it was all using that, you know, kit of parts to basically bring the two halves of Middlesex Avenue back together, but basically do away with the suicide lane, which I think the police department finds, you know, people just use it. They make their own. You know, oftentimes they're not even making the left-hand turn. They just create this extra lane and just do this renegade move. That's probably one of the most dangerous maneuvers that occurs in terms of life and safety. There were other improvements on Main Street that we focused on, such as the new intersection, new and main intersection. But again, the idea would be that we would, and I think the good news is we've actually shown that we can take back parts of Middlesex Avenue that were nasty and unlivable, and that you didn't want to walk along. And again, it's a combination not just of the geometry of street design, but also what you do in terms of creating those walls of the outdoor room. And in terms of what's done in the street improvements, the one thing that DOT, and we met with 3 different administrations, and I have high confidence that we would be given the same reception from the current commissioner and his organization. They basically said, we don't have to take over ownership or jurisdiction any improvements that we do that are not the typical toolbox that DOT uses. So we want to use our own street lights, or brick pavers, or bollards and Main Street street lamps. We just have to be willing to install and maintain them, but they would maintain the ownership or the jurisdiction of the street. Just quickly, in focusing on trying to slow down some of that traffic through the center of town. It doesn't impede anybody, but it brings it down, is that, and I think the chief really touched on this, that the slower cars are moving, the greater the likelihood that somebody survives a potential accident. Countdown signals being part of the pedestrian-friendly toolbox. Things that are in here about, needs to do much better job in striping a lot of the intersections to make them more noticeable. And this was one of the specific proposals in addition to the new main intersection, which, by the way, used to have pedestrian activated signals some way back. The county took them out. I can't tell you when, but they were there in the mid-'80s. So we were still having problems even after our traffic calming improvements here with this parking space and with cars using that to create another lane through here. So this was the idea in that plan, was to come back in and actually further narrow the street. And I think, again, a success story. A parking space was eliminated. I know Sean's going to get that on the International Parking Day website next year to say, I live in a town that eliminated a parking space, widened the sidewalk. We created our new sidewalk standards there as well. Again, that would be complemented by, we think, absolutely looking at sort of a public plaza type intersection treatment at Main and New to really make that feel home. Could tie in with the potential town square down here. And then at the post office, we know it's a very problematic intersection. Actually, before I say, I wanted to hit on one last thing about the bus stops in town. I think that showed such a care and attention to pedestrian bus riders in the community that you were willing to put a public space, a public improvement next to it. You think about that. How many towns would say, we're going to put a memorial next to a bus stop? But the bus stop had dignity of the level that you could actually carry some of that character over there. And then it doesn't relieve us from the fact that this is a problematic intersection, very dangerous. And so the concept here, which we did with the former chief at our side, was to sort of texture pave this whole area to kind of create awareness, maybe with a speed table. It is probably jaywalking #1 central spot. Everybody does it at this location. So can we use bollards and texture paving to try to recognize that we're never going to get everybody in that crosswalk, but to try to make motorists more aware that this is a heavy pedestrian intersection with the post office and transit riders, what have you. There were a series of improvements called for at the station. I know Bob James had a couple of ideas that were incorporated in there as well, increasing the bicycle parking, things that could be done with some other things at the station. Traffic calming. Again, because it's an art, not a science, and we know that we didn't get all the geometry we really wanted at the beginning out, focusing on that gateway coming in. We know cars come down off the 287 bridge, they're accelerating as they hit it, sort of the islands aren't wide enough to slow them down, and so what we did in here was suggest, and again, the priority of this is something for the community to work on at another point, is narrowing the road here and then widening the movement there so that we actually force more movement or friction into the geometry of motorists. I'm still not convinced. I think the challenge that we have in this community, we've built a lot of traffic calming that we could get approved by the county on South Main Street. There is just such a volume of pass-through traffic. I just don't know, is it at 50 times or 150 or 550 that people just get used to it and it just doesn't have the impact, and that's a challenge. So that was the idea there. Again, make that a little wider. And then last, we focused on 2 other intersections that had a relationship. This one at Oakland and Grove, leading to the park, which would use bump outs, and again, an improvement there. And then one last one that we did. All of these were done with the police department, with the public safety officer, some way to deal with this. We had this phenomena at Clive and Maine and Plainfield of these rolling stops where people just don't stop. So that was the idea there. So that basically wraps up the plan. The last was really focusing on the need to deal with taking the elements of the bike plan the county has laid out. They have no plans to improve it. I think taking another look at biking relative to the Greenway being open and the fact that you now have a place to reach and figuring out really what the best bike plan is. We didn't try to leap ahead, and I know you could criticize the plan for that. I've talked to Tom about this. because maybe it didn't embrace it. We just couldn't find enough community members to work with to figure out something that we felt comfortable including. And so I think it's an incremental layered approach that you might need to take on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'm now going to turn to Bill Neary, the president of Keep Middlesex Moving.
Thank you, Mayor. The mayor mentioned earlier, in a previous life, I was also the mayor of East Brunswick Township. So the people who are concerned about pedestrians in Metuchen, I invite you to do your window shopping for leisurely walk along Route 18 anytime. It's okay. That's our main street. Before I tell you about Keep Middlesex Moving, I want to congratulate Metuchen, Mayor Bahala, and his staff and his volunteers. This is a very progressive community. It has a history of being that way, and I think its history and its legacy is going to be in the future. What you heard tonight from your planner and from your police chief is actually the way the state of New Jersey and most of the country is starting to look at the reality of what's happening in the future. Department of Transportation has finally figured out, after about 90 years, that they're never going to build themselves out of traffic congestion. And the Complete Streets policy is a way to open up the roads for all types of vehicles and all types of modes of transportation. And that's what Keep Middlesex Moving has been doing for 24 years. Our mission and our goal has always been, we're a private nonprofit organization. Our mission, our goal has always been to help people find ways to get around without having to drive a car by themselves. So we work with businesses, industries, municipalities, with carpools and van pools, promoting mass transit, promoting bicycle and pedestrian safety, which is why I've been invited here to be part of what your program is all about. The thing we're talking about specifically, I think more than else, is the orange flags. And I know the publicity you got of that, and we got on that at Keep Middlesex Moving, we're really proud of the publicity we got, is one of those ideas that's very successful in Portland, Oregon, very successful in Salt Lake City, Utah, successful in different parts of the country where the culture is a little bit different. I think the chief summed it up. A yellow light in New Jersey means close your eyes and hit the gas. The culture we have for pedestrians is that they are in the way. Our cars are the right of way. Despite the fact that it's the law, despite the fact that's what's supposed to be done, we have to change ways of looking. And these orange flags that you have a potential for controversy and have a potential for people complaining and have a potential for all kinds of things to happen maybe negatively. So which is why I think your council and your mayor, by stepping forward and doing something this proactive, an attempt to use a tool that might actually help the people in Metuchen and teach the people who pass through Metuchen the proper way to drive a car and the proper way to be a pedestrian, is a big step. I met with the safety committee with Tyreen and with Jay, and I think some of the issues we face are, first of all, they may be stolen. There's a real value to getting a wooden doll with a cheap plastic flag on it. They're worth thousands of dollars each, you know, and that's why we're happy to give them to the borough of Metuchen. But I'm also a little concerned that they could also be spears in somebody's windshield. If they don't stop, the pedestrian might decide to react. I also am somewhat concerned that people think they have the flag, so therefore they're vulnerable. They're not vulnerable anymore. They're invulnerable completely. They can walk across the street and not have to be concerned about a car because now they have an orange flag. There's issues that have to be part of the education and part of the enforcement, and the township itself showing the leadership, I think, can make this a much better program. I think it's an attempt to show that there's another tool that can be used, another tool that make a walkable community so much better. A downtown place like Metuchen is few and far between in suburban New Jersey. So I think it's great that your business community can appreciate the value of having pedestrians who can feel safe walking in their towns. At Keep Middlesex Moving, we have a variety of different programs. We're looking forward to partnering with you as a town. We have a senior pedestrian program that we work with the senior centers. We have videos and tools that we use for that. We have a Safe Routes to School program to teach the children safe ways to get to school, walking school buses. We have all kinds of different programs to encourage a community to look outside of the car, to not think about a car as the only way to get around. And I'm looking forward to the future working with you. And the orange flags that you have are the first step. It's really a major step. As you know, when it was announced that your town is going to go with the orange flags, I got a call from Reuters, of all places. I mean, it went national almost. It was in all kinds of media. Mayor, I saw you crossing the street.
In fact,
Almost safely.
Channel 12 was here today again.
See,
So-
it's because it's so innovative and because it has the potential to really start changing the culture. I think I want to congratulate you on that. I have a couple little tchotchkes we brought tonight for you with little pedestrian bags and some of those. Jim has the wristbands. I got some wristbands, reflective wristbands, so when you go out walking, you can be safe and be seen. Little things that I can do to encourage you and your neighbors. But I think it is a community effort. I want to congratulate Metuchen for really stepping up to the plate. Middlesex County is so densely populated. There's more people living in Middlesex County than in 6 other states. So we know we have to face the reality of how crowded we are, and this type of innovative work, I think, is going to go a long way. So thank you for participating. I thank you for inviting me to be part of it, and I'm looking forward to the things we can do in the future for Borough of Metuchen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Bill. I'm now going to turn to our co-chairperson, Jay Galeotto.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Traffic and Transportation Committee, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. This is the first of what we hope will be a series of town... Sorry? Is that better? It's pretty close there. Okay. I was just thanking everyone for coming out tonight. This is the first in what we hope will be a series of town talks on this topic of pedestrian safety and traffic in Metuchen. The Traffic and Transportation Safety Committee is a committee of volunteers, of residents of the borough. We have a site on the borough webpage. I encourage you to look at it. If you haven't, there's a simple button on the site that you can push to provide any feedback directly into the committee. That gets funneled to us. We review during our meetings on a monthly basis. The committee exists really for 2 primary purposes. The first is to receive and review correspondence from the public, primarily the residents of Metuchen, around unsafe conditions around the borough. And the second is to refer those on appropriately into the borough administration, either to the borough council, to the police chief, Department of Public Works, et cetera. As I mentioned, you can submit information through the webpage, or tonight we have pedestrian comments forms here. They're on the shelf in the front of the room that we welcome any feedback or any issues, any comments that you'd like to share. We will compile feedback from this meeting and the other meetings and then provide that feedback out to the community through the webpage. So again, thank you for the attendance this evening.
Tyreen, do you want to say a few words?
Just very briefly, I wanted to mention a couple of things as I was listening to everybody speak. You know, as a pedestrian that had issues, which I was very loud about, it's sometimes hard to hear that I have to be even more vigilant, or I have to be the one constantly looking, when we all know that cars bear at least as much, and in many cases more responsibility, but we are the ones that have more to lose. And so, you know, I kind of advise my son to be paranoid, always be looking, no matter what you're doing, always look. And as I said, sometimes it kind of seems unfair to be constantly giving the pedestrian the tip, but as I said, we're the ones that are going to lose. And I think something that Jim Constantine brought up, that, you know, the more you look at the traffic stuff in town, I think people who are familiar with it, it's kind of obvious, but the impact of that 287 interchange and the truck traffic through town is really quite huge. So if you think about visibility on Main Street and visibility on Lake with trucks, you know, it really creates this, you know, wall, and you don't have a real sense of what's going on around you. So sometimes there's these big picture things that have a huge impact, and sometimes it's little things like striping on a crosswalk. But I think that was basically the 2 things that I wanted to mention.
Okay. I'm going to open it to the public. If anybody has a question for any of our speakers or a comment, just come up to the mic, please. And just state your name and address.
Thank you. I'm Barbara Crafton from St. Luke's, Metuchen, and I want to express gratitude for the orange flags that we have, where buckets are there. We're checking them a couple times a day to make sure that all the flags are balanced so that nobody is flagless. I have high hopes about it, and I'm glad. I thank you for the promptness with which you addressed our terrible event. A long-time citizen of this town who is an active lady, you know, is still in bed, and I don't know when she's going to be getting out. and we just can't have this anymore. And I know it's just a tool, but it's, I think, a good tool, and it's a real start. So I'm so grateful to be kind of in the forefront of this, and we're just happy to be a part of it, and I thank you for doing it. So don't forget us, and we won't forget the flags.
Oh, and we won't, and we appreciate your help, because I know that you notified your parishioners and everybody, and, you know, we're trying to, it's one of the phases, education and, you know, implementation of some of the things that we're trying to get done. But thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for making noise about it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Good evening, Kathy McNulty, 24 Upland Ave. I'm going to piggyback on Barbara because that was my mom on December 23rd, as many of you know, if you saw the organizational meeting broadcast. A couple of things that I want to talk about. First of all, thank you for getting on board. But at that organizational meeting, we talked about a very close neighbor of ours, Highland Park, and their zero tolerance. I don't like driving through Highland Park because I got to be on my toes. And I want Metuchen to become that. And I've spoken with Rob on multiple occasions. We've had many, many conversations about the safety here in Metuchen. A lot of it's great, but we still have a long ways to go. Would I be here had December 23rd not played out the way it had? I don't know. Maybe hanging around Rob I might have been. But you touched on some key phrases and key words that I want to talk about. I teach driver ed. I'm a high school teacher, and I teach driver ed. And one of the things that I talk about with my kids is defensive driving. And I think we need to get everybody to walk defensively as well. The same way you behave behind the wheel of a car, you need to behave as you're walking. You know, Rob, you talked about those left turn people every day, coming Maine onto 27. And there was that period of time where I was very, very angry, and I would roll down my window and say, "You don't have the right of way." And people would look at me. Who's this crazy person? Well, you know, it's me trying to educate as politely as I can. Secondly, education across the board. Rob, you said we have something in the schools. We got to take it straight through. Sir, you said we have something for the seniors as well. It's got to go all the way through. We were taught as young people how to cross the street properly, and we've gotten to a point in society where we just don't. Like you said, Mr. Mayor, we're plugged in. We just don't know. Publicity. You got to get the word out, and I know it'll happen. I think I first met Tyrene at the fair with the posters, and my poster's been in my car window since October. So, you know, let's get the word out as best we can. We're doing it at St. Luke's, but that's probably because it really hit home. And I think we as a community need to have it get out. Metuchen, Middlesex County, New Jersey, because each and every one of us needs to be safe behind the wheel of our car, on our bicycles, and as we walk the streets. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, just to follow up with this, like I said, I think you hit the 3 points that we talk about in pedestrian issues. It's the 3 E's. That's education, enforcement, and engineering. And I think what you've seen tonight from the borough here is they're concentrating on all 3. The engineering part, making sure the lights and the sidewalks and everything else are proper. The enforcement from the public safety department is very important. And the education is the final part, which I'm part of and the rest of this committee is going to be part of. So I think those are the 3 E's that you just touched on, wrapped up the whole thing, what the whole purpose of this presentation is. And I think you got it.
There was someone else that wanted to speak?
I live on Woodbridge Avenue, and I received my
Just
lovely,
your name, please.
lovely lawn sign from Tyrene that says Metuchen Stops. We walk, my family walks every day.
And your name?
Oh, Jennifer Cassio.
Okay.
We walk to and from school every day. I could bore you with countless stories I'm sure you've already heard about cars not stopping, cars speeding. Unfortunately, we weren't one of the crosswalks that earned our orange flags yet. I hope that we do. In the meanwhile, my children have taken to holding up the lawn sign and, you know, shaking it wildly to ask the cars to please stop. They still don't. Maybe, I don't know, anyone can answer this. What else can we do, because the frustration is daily? Like I said, we are walkers, we are pedestrians. We use the town, you know, we're very close, we're always walking. It is, there's what can we do? You know, do I wave my hand? Do I, you know, what can you suggest that we do? Because also, when we're going to school, we could sit there and wait while cars just continually pass us by. And we're on a schedule, you know, and of course we leave early, you know, whatever we can do. But what's the suggestion? Do you have any?
You know, you're at a crosswalk, I mean, yeah, you could wave, you could do something like that to draw their attention, you know. That may be helpful. Carry a bag, that may be helpful. You know, it's hard to say, you know, it's a matter of, and I know the frustration. I walk around town.
Yeah, it's, you know,
trying
and I
to
just
cross,
also.
It's extremely frustrating.
Okay.
It's frustrating. You know, hopefully, you know, we'll get the flags over on your end, and,
I hope so. I just want to raise, you know, that intersection, because also it's a church, it's a preschool.
Right.
It's the train station, it's people going to the train, it's, you
Sure.
know, it's, and I saw that it wasn't out there, and I missed that prior meeting, but you know, I've spoken to Tyrene, I've spoken to Allison, you know, just trying to get the word out there that this is, you know, again, one of the problem intersections, and maybe not one of the biggest problems in town, but definitely a problem, so.
No, but it's something that I think that you see that we're focusing on here, and we're trying to get it addressed. I don't think there's any one thing that we can do. I think it's a combination of things where, as former Mayor Neary said, it's about breaking the culture. It's about changing the attitude. And Kathy, I don't mind if our record is, or our reputation is, don't speed through Metuchen, or don't, you know, allow, you know, make sure you allow the pedestrians or you're going to get ticketed. I really don't care about that. I think that's good, all right? And I think that's a whole phase that we're working together. We're working together with our police, we're working with the community and traffic and transportation. And anyone here that, you know, would like to get involved with traffic and transportation, please. It's a public meeting that they have. You could come out and, you know, help to be involved in this, because this is going to be, it's not going to be a turn the switch kind of thing. It's going to be a long-term process. As Jim said, if you look at the history, it takes a long time to take back streets, to take back so that people feel safe walking on our streets. So it's something that we're working on.
One thing I want to mention about enforcement, you know, in the Borough of Metuchen, the police department, we write more tickets than Edison, we write more tickets than Highland Park, we write more tickets. We are very strict in enforcement. And when you mention about, you know, being the kind of town, we do have that reputation. You know, we get a lot of complaints, various areas of town, speeding, Mason Drive, Woodbridge Avenue, Agard Avenue, truck traffic issues, you know. So, you know, we try to hit as many as we can, you know. Unfortunately, we can't be every place, you know. Sure. And that's frustrating, too. But, you know, I just want to assure you that we are out there, and, you know, I tell people, you know, if there's a problem, an issue, you know, call me or call the captain or whatever. Sometimes that's how we find out about things, you know. You live on the street. You know, patrol cars, they're driving around, they're not stationary, you know, that often. So, you know your street, you know the problems, you know the issues you have, so sometimes it needs to be brought to our attention, then we can.
It feels like there's a sign that says accelerate on that hill going up from Main Street.
We,
as the cars
yeah,
fly.
on Woodbridge Avenue?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had, in the years I've been here, instances where, you know, it's almost you have to train the people, because anybody that uses that road, most people it's the same people driving it. And we had, you know, we've had issues on certain roads where we're getting a lot of speeders. You know, we'll do a traffic study. You know, we'll find out, okay, yeah, you know, we have a problem, and then we'll go out there and we'll hit it really, really hard. And then we'll do a traffic study 3, 4, 5 months later, and we do see a change, you know. What happens a lot of times, you know, we divert to another location that we're having a problem, and now it sort of comes back. So, you know, it's a little frustrating for us too, you know, because it's you know, it's an ongoing problem.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Mayor, can I ask the chief a question?
Sure.
As a follow-up to that, I believe either the borough or the police department either has on order or will be ordering one of those electronic signboards that
Yes.
can be moved around.
Yeah, I believe OEM's going to be getting
Oh,
one of
yeah,
them. Yes.
right. So I think that could be something that maybe we could
Sure.
put on these high high-speed areas, and just basically, instead of having a resident trying to.
Oh,
jump
yeah,
up
you
and
could
down,
put,
like,
you know, slow down, pedestrian, whatever.
Because it's all part of that, as we've already
Absolutely.
talked about, that culture change, but I think having one of those electronic board that drivers will start seeing, it's another step. Sure.
By what instrument do you intend to assess the effectiveness of the flag crossing? When do you intend to assess it? And how hard would it be to extend the flag program if you judge it to be effective?
It's not hard to, if it's effective, to move it to other areas.
I would think not.
Okay. We're going to do it as a pilot for a few months, try it, see how it works, and by talking to you and your church, by talking to the people that are using it, see if it works that way. The other thing is, how long do they hold up? In other words, are we having a problem with theft of people, taking them?
So far, not.
No, so far, not at all. We've been good. But it's only been ineffective for, 4 days, 3 days.
I would lay in some around Halloween.
Okay, well, something like that, and we have some other ideas about putting cameras up that could deter people from, if we have something that takes pictures of people taking them, kind of thing, or potentially, is connected to the police department. We might be able to do something like that. But it's going to be a difficult thing to say, it's just going to be something that the Traffic and Transportation Committee is going to have to look at and say, look, we think this is working, we've interviewed people in the area, and our police with their input, and we say, yeah, let's extend it to other areas. But I want to try the 2 areas first and see how it goes, and give it a couple months, and let's see.
Okay, couple months.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that too, Mr. Mayor, I think the intent from the start was to use the flags widely. And so the pilot is just to get a feel for how it's working and to make sure that it's positive. So
they have picked other intersections, but we wanted a pilot to
See it at any difficult intersection. It would be easy to put in.
it's so far the feedback, and again, we really encourage the feedback to come in, as the mayor said. So far the feedback has been very positive. People are skeptical until they try them, and when they try them, they see they actually work.
Yeah.
See, I think
One of the things I would like to see us do, though, too, is, and I know the chief is working on this, just like we have coming into town by the blinking lights, I would like to see on Middlesex Avenue, pedestrian crossing painted into the roadway and painted into the roadway on either side, so that as people are driving up, it's not just, somebody coming out with a flag. There's a warning. When we come into town on Main Street, coming into town, it's twice, once before the bridge, once as soon as you're coming up underneath the bridge. Going the other way, it's just once. But I'd like to see that kind of thing. Plus, we know DOT is going to be doing restriping in the crosswalk there. But I think that if we could have that pedestrian crossing painted, it gives more notice to people, even if it said flag pedestrian crossing, if we could get DOT to do that, that's even better. So, I think there are other things that we could do to step it up or increase the program a little bit better.
Thanks.
Okay?
I have a question for Chief Rettenberg. In the past, in our neighborhood, when we've had issues with people, I live on Upland, so there's people cutting that Grove light there. They come down Upland, New York to cut the light at Grove there. And I've simply called and submitted a license plate number, and there's been follow-up. Is that something we as citizens can do if we encounter someone who is, ignoring us in the crosswalk to jot down a license plate, or is that not?
we can't issue a summons for it. You would have to be the one that issues a summons because you were the person that observed it. So, you could give us the information if it's a local person and it's somebody you're seeing this person regularly doing something, we could definitely follow up with it.
I know that when the quote-unquote drag racing was going on Norris and Mason, license plates were taken down and people were dealt with as was appropriate. Is that, in the same vein, that if we see a situation where, hey, this same plate every day is coming by, tearing up Woodbridge to get to the train on time.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that something?
Just have a situation like that.
Well, I'm just saying,
Somebody
if
wrote
that's
into the committee.
receptive, if your
Yeah.
department is receptive to that, maybe that's something we do. If it's not something that would work
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
then
if it's something that's, like I said, it's a regular, if it's a one-time incident, we'd be doing that
Right, right.
100 times a day. But, you call up and you say, you know what, this red pickup truck every morning, and I've had calls saying, hey, we got this guy and he passes a school bus and it's stopped every day, I'll send a car out there and we'll wait
Right.
for him. And, we've issued.
So again,
some-
on that education piece, that
Absolutely.
the town knows that if we
Right.
see these repetitive, we're not helpless if these repetitive offenses occur, we can
Correct.
let you
Oh,
folks know.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Good evening, Daniel Labar, 581 Middlesex Avenue. I want to thank the administration, the traffic committee, all the officials who participated tonight. A few observations I have both as a pedestrian, driver, former traffic committee member that I would add. There is an extensive knowledge base on all these pedestrian safety issues that the borough has reached out to previously at the Alan Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers. They have a bike pedestrian advisory committee that meets quarterly. Their next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 13th, between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. There are a number of, it's their, they look at it as a scholarly project, but there are a number of individuals and professionals that attend the meeting that the borough can reach out to for further insights. We did utilize them in putting together the working group, which along with our borough planner and borough officials helped redesign the Penn Avenue and Main Street location. The report that was issued by that committee in May 2010, which is posted on the Traffic Committee website, includes observations and recommendations which are not limited to Penn Avenue, but really have borough-wide application and really should be looked at. They also dovetail with some observations that Traffic Committee members have made over the years. As a driver, I can attest to the fact that a number of intersections are obscured by overgrown hedges, shrubbery, that makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to see pedestrians approaching an intersection as you reach the stop line, and that you end up having to ease into the crosswalk to actually see right to left. I'm not sure whether there is some municipal ordinance that can be implemented, some other enforcement action through the zoning officer, maybe informally, to encourage property owners to trim back hedges and shrubbery that may be an obscuring factor. The other issues with regard to breaking the psychology, highway mentality. In communities that I travel through in South Jersey, like Collingswood and Runnymede, that have county cross routes that run through in Black Horse Pike, they use the stop for pedestrian stanchions that we have much more aggressively than we do. Basically, they place them in each and every marked crosswalk. And the effect is almost like a Jersey barrier effect as far as narrowing the view, getting the driver's attention that a crosswalk is there, and narrowing the perspective of the street so it doesn't look like a highway. That's one recommendation, relatively modest cost that we can look into. The other issue that the chief referred to and the planner mentioned is the issue of the reflectors in the crosswalk signs. I agree with the chief that the change in the legislation and New Jersey DOT's own installation of red-colored reflectors establishes a precedent that all of the flashing signs we have and intend to install in the future should have red as the official reflector for the sign when activated. I agree. The other issue really has to do with the reflectivity and the endurance of pedestrian markings, crosswalk markings, particularly in the high-use crossings downtown, Central Business District. The report recommends thermoplastic application, which includes a higher reflectivity and also higher endurance, longer-lasting markings. We've experienced that difficulty at Highland, Hillside and Main, Pearl Street, all the downtown high-volume locations. I don't think that's a super expensive issue, but it's maybe something that the parking authority can contribute to, since all of those crossings may be deemed to be referable to servicing the parking authority facilities, since commuters use them. So perhaps the borough doesn't have to shoulder that financial responsibility alone. The parking authority might share in that. But definitely having a standardized crosswalk pattern, as well as the highest reflectivity and endurance possible, would be something the borough really should be working towards going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labar. Also, if you could get that list of streets where you think the growth from the hedges is bad, then we could get it to the zoning officer. Okay? Anyone else from the public?
Hi, Susan Levinson on Clive Street. At the end of the slideshow, it showed the intersection of Clive and Plainfield and Maine, which is such a good thing that it got done. I don't know if it's ever been acknowledged, but there used to be a lot of accidents there, and just that it's done is just brilliant, and I thank you.
Thank you. That took a lot of work, I know, with our planner and with our police department and getting the county, because part of that's county area, to approve what we have in going with the four-way stop. At first, they didn't want to go with a four-way stop, but it did get done, and yes, the number of accidents have been greatly reduced. Correct, Chief?
Absolutely.
The only thing is, I think that there's one place where there's no, when I come from Clive, I think there's really one place where there's no crosswalk. There's no delineated crosswalk.
Okay.
If you go from crossing Plainfield from Clive, right at that island,
Okay.
there's no delineated.
We'll have our DPW take a look at that.
Hi, Tara Matisse. Thank you all for taking the time to come here tonight. We all really appreciate it. Mr. Labar made some excellent points that I want to second. Mrs. Levinson also, I live near that same intersection, and it's a big improvement. And it is true that there's no crosswalk on the one side. What I wanted to ask was, Chief Rentenberg, you talked about educating the students in the schools, and I'm curious how often you go to the schools to speak to them. Is that annually or?
Well, we started it last year. We did, I believe we were at Edgar, I believe Campbell, and, we're looking at, to expanding that.
Excellent. I think that,
We look at something maybe every year.
yeah, I think that would be a worthwhile program for the kids annually at all schools, if you can pull it off. I was wondering, I know there's been some talk among some folks about whether there's a possibility of increasing signage, and I know we have lots of signage around town, but maybe at the entrances to town indicating that we are working to be a slow-driving town, a town that respects crosswalks and pedestrians, a town that stops for pedestrians. Some way of advertising that to drivers who come through and don't live here and haven't heard us all talking about this. So,
I'll turn that over and let the traffic and transportation look at that and work with our police.
yeah,
Okay.
they have been talking about it. I just wanted to second the idea.
I think that's one of the things that we're taking away from some of the stuff that we've been looking at, is that the gateways are really clear in terms of getting that message out to people that are passing through, so definitely.
Could be one way to help change the culture for people who don't live here and hear about it all the time.
I know that I was at one of the programs at Campbell School last year, and then they walked from Campbell School with their lunches to Omeezer Park and back, and they saw a film, and our Officer Granado was involved, Officer Joe Keene was involved, and I know that they were going to make a recommendation to the chief about doing it, not only there, but at Metuchen Christian Academy in St. Francis, so that, and then I believe the film was shown on METV that the children saw, which was
Oh, that sounds great.
good.
That's a good way to do it. Do you know if the schools have been notified about the flags and given instruction on how to use them?
I talked to the Edgar, or I
you
left a
speak to
message
Edgar?
for the Edgar
Okay.
principal, and Principal Paragallo at the high school, I spoke to him.
Yeah, I mean, I
in
can check on
person.
that as well, but I just wondered if you had spoken to them or...
Yeah, because I figured those are the two that are closest to those intersections that might be using them.
Exactly.
But it's not a bad idea. I mean, definitely, there's possibilities of people walking to Moss and others, so.
Yeah, and another way to get the parents educated as well, who might be walking their kids to school and...
Okay.
If I can throw in one additional part about the school students, our Safe Routes to School program actually has people who are professionally trained to operate within the school system itself, and I know Metuchen's worked with us on different types of programs. The Safe Routes to School program is administered through the DOT and the Bloustein School at Rutgers University. And the schools that do get involved with us in terms of learning the proper way for school crossing and children to walk to school, they get a lot of points for the future of infrastructure grants also. So when we're talking money here about traffic improvements or even signs or striping or anything else, a borough of Metuchen could take a big step forward by continuing efforts working with our KMM programs for Safe Routes to School. And this past year, when the state just a month ago gave out several $1 million in infrastructure grants, the only community in Middlesex County that received any money was Cranberry, because the way the state makes their arbitrary way of granting these kind of funds. They're very competitive grants, but I think these type of programs take the town to a much higher level, and especially working with our Safe Routes to School program even helps it even more. So we're working continuously to try and make Metuchen become safe like that through those infrastructure grants also, not just the signage, but the things we can work on.
Yeah, excellent. I know we have a large group of people who are very interested in safe routes to schools, so we'll definitely
That's
keep
why we're happy
talking.
to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Hi, my name is Kara Cute, and there is a group, Tara and I are both involved, and I would love to talk to you more about having more involvement of Keep Middlesex Moving with getting, especially International Walk to School Day.
We had a meeting this morning with, I guess, 12 municipalities from the county came with teachers and with police officers from around the county to see our whole program in motion. Unfortunately, it was tough for Metuchen to have somebody there today, but I know we've been talking in the past about it. But at the same time, we'd be happy to sit down and show you what we can do. We have our people come out and show you the whole presentation.
That would be great.
That's including bicycle rodeos and everything else.
Great. I had a question for the police chief. I know you mentioned, a lot of people have mentioned enforcement, and you said that we give out more tickets than Highland Park or Edison, which personally haven't gotten a number of tickets in Highland Park is a little hard to believe, but I will trust that that is true. I'm just wondering how ticketing for drivers who don't stop for pedestrians in crosswalks compares with just general speeding tickets. Do you have a sense, or in terms of the priorities that you give the officers, how often do you give out tickets? How many tickets a year for drivers for not stopping, who might not be speeding, but who don't actually stop for pedestrians?
If you look at all our statistics, it's pretty well divided up because, you know, whether it's speeding, it's pedestrian safety, it's truck issues, you know, we try to go out there and hit as many areas as we can. We try to concentrate during peak times or times where we get the most complaints. So if we're going to do pedestrian safety, we try to do it, you know, during rush hour or school time or, you know, speeding. You know, there's certain times, you know, once again, rush hour, that kind of thing. Obviously, pedestrian safety is a priority. Speeding is a priority because these are all things that could affect, you know, people's lives. So. Pedestrian safety is very high on our list right now, and I mentioned earlier that we had gotten a couple grants, and you know,
decoy.
we were writing, you know, 40, 50 tickets a month, just and you know, on some of the pedestrian tickets. So we hit them pretty good.
Another point that's related to is the role of the police department in our committee. There's always an officer in the committee meetings. Usually it's the chief or one of the captains, and they're active participants. So again, as the feedback comes in, it goes directly to the police department and related to the enforcement element that the mayor mentioned.
My name is Linda Koskoski, and I just want to say I'm very grateful that I live in a community where we do take this issue seriously. So thank you so much for being involved in this. I live at the end of Amboy Avenue by the, just a few blocks past Edgar and Amboy Avenue, and I believe that's one of the most dangerous intersections in this town, and I feel like it's, you know, because it's on the outskirts of town, it's really not paid attention to. But I use that intersection every day, and I feel it's dangerous in a car, as a biker, as a walker. So I would just say that as you're moving forward with all of your planning, and I intend to be involved, to just keep that intersection in mind. It's offset with Carpenter. Do you know that intersection? Yeah. It's just, it's horrible. You can't cross there. I often tell my children not to cross at the light, although it seems like that would be the right place to cross, but it's so dangerous. So just going forward, if we can keep an eye on that one, because, you know, I don't think it gets enough attention paid to it.
Anyone else? Yes, young lady. I think you might have to adjust the microphone, though.
Melanie McNeil, 12 Carson Avenue. For my Girl Scout troop, we're trying to earn our Bronze Award, and we're doing it by pedestrian safety. And as a kid, what can I do to like tell others about this and spread the word?
Well, I think that if you work with the Traffic and Transportation Committee, your whole group could be at the Spring Fest or at the June Bug handing out literature about education as a good step. And I'm sure that they will get your name, address, and phone number, and our two chairpersons will be in touch with you.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for volunteering your group.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm not going to cheat. Sean Massey, Highland Ave. It's been great to hear about all the E's tonight, working in transportation. It's always easy when you've got these letters or acronyms to work through, and the E's are great. They're wonderful. There's one other one that I would talk about that I think is perhaps not as important as engineering, but it's a big one. It's encouragement. Walking is great. Biking is great. I think we want to make sure that we're spreading a message to our community that walking, biking, and getting out there on foot or on our cycles is a good thing. It's good for all of us. On the engineering front, which is, like I said, probably the most important one, just one suggestion. The circulation plan is obviously good stuff. Jim and I have talked about it a couple of times, and it has some helpful suggestions as to mitigation measures that might help slow down automobile traffic and make sure that it's safer for our bikers and walkers through town. But I would say at this stage of the game, it's probably helpful to revisit some of the capital suggestions that are in there, whether it's the suicide alley on 27 or some of the pinching suggestions over on South Main, to go through the list of recommended capital upgrades and say, okay, here are 10, 15, 20, here are key intersections that we know are hot spots that we think are problem areas, and identify their priorities and have an initiative matrix where we say these are short-term priorities, these are long-term priorities, these are easy fixes that won't cost a lot of money, like the flags. Obviously they're a short-term fix, they're not capital, but they're an initiative. There's something that we're doing that's helping mitigate for these impacts, and have a working document that the stakeholders, folks up here, everyone in the room, can see and actively connect with and say, okay, well, this is our plan to address pedestrian bicycle safety in the borough of Metuchen, and everyone can see it, it's tangible, they know what it is, there are clear-cut goals and objectives in the short and long term, and then everyone can get behind trying to push the priorities that the borough has. It's great that this committee is up and running and doing good work. I look forward to helping out and getting involved with your meetings and helping on something like that. I think it would be certainly helpful in the long term, certainly as monies become available to help support the infrastructure that we need to make sure that we have a built environment that's safe for all users in the borough. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Council President to respond, but thank you for your comments.
I think the idea of prioritizing some of those initiatives is a good one, because we've had those recommendations for a while out of the circulation plan, and as monies may become available, I think it's good to have the list of priorities so we know which intersections are key and which of those recommendations are sort of doable. So to move from like a wish list, all these things that probably could be done, to moving it into something that is more actionable, I think is a good suggestion, and I think collectively we'll work to do that.
Okay.
Before everybody leaves, Bill, you have some things that giveaways. I want to make sure people.
I've got some things for you, some little gifts. That's all.
Okay, so just
And
make sure
welcome,
no one leaves.
citizens.
Well, I just wanted to close with, I want to thank, somebody else from the public? Okay.
Dorothy Rasmussen, 180 Center Street. What I also wanted to bring out is I have walked around town a lot. I've talked to business owners. I've sat outside in some of the areas. And one thing I notice is when people come out of the train and they come up by Variety Village. At rush hour, it's like every man for himself. The cars block up that whole intersection. It's terrible. At one point, I sat there one day and I videotaped for about 15 minutes just what happened, you know, in the cycle of trains coming in. What it does is when they block up the intersections, pedestrians are forced to walk into oncoming traffic to try to cross from the Metuchen Liquors over to Metuchen Savings Bank. So maybe as part of our initiative, if we're working with the county to do striping, painting, whatever, if they could put a do not block the box there to try to, you know, mitigate the problem we're having with, you know, cars, you know, entering the intersection when they should be leaving it free for both other cars and pedestrians.
That's a very good suggestion. I'll ask our chief to work with our DPW on that.
Okay, thank you.
And the traffic and transportation group. Anyone else? I don't want to miss anyone. Well, I thank all of our guests up here today, our chief, Bill Neary from Keep Middlesex Moving, and I thank all of you for coming out. This is the first step, as Jay had said before, and I think that the important thing that you should leave here with is that we are trying to change the culture, and we are trying to create a situation where drivers know they must slow down in Metuchen, and that they must yield to pedestrians, whether when they're in a crosswalk, and obey the speed limits, or they're going to face consequences. Tonight's meeting is just a start, a way to figure out, and a way to see if we could accomplish some goals. Now, some of the next steps are working with the Traffic and Transportation Committee. Their meetings are public, and they are
The second Wednesday of every month.
second Wednesday of every month upstairs in this building. You're all welcome to come, all right? Also working with our police department, working with the county and the DOT, and seeing if you have a suggestion, please make sure you get those suggestions to us, to the Traffic and Transportation Committee, so that we could try to act on it wherever possible. If it's something short-term and it's not a lot of money, like maybe going to have our zoning officer go out and talk to people if their hedges are too long or too big and blocking a view, we could get that done hopefully relatively quick. And we will be testing this pilot to see how it goes for the next couple months, see how that goes, and then maybe extending it to the other intersections that the Traffic and Transportation Committee has already looked at and recommended. So I thank you very much, and I applaud all of you for coming out tonight. Thank you.
As Mr. Neary said, he does have some giveaways, and we do have comment forms up front, as well as frequently answered questions about pedestrian flags. If you want to take those.
Please take some of the free handouts from Keep Middlesex Moving. You made my day.
Like always.